And we are back. Welcome again to the 29th edition, if you're counting, of the Smart to Noise Ratio Pro Audio Podcast. I'm your humble host, Jon Dayton, joined tonight by your usual co-host, Anthony Kosobucki.
Hey there.
And our guest tonight is Matt Mackiewicz.
Greetings.
There he is. Bass player around town. He's actually one of the cats I met when I first started my job here. I got a blind gig mixing for his band. They packed me in a van with two nutty guitar players, took me to Michigan for a weekend, and everybody came home smiling. So it was a happy little story, and that's how I slowly weaseled my way into the job I have today. So anyway, Matt's our guest because, one, we've just been wanting to have him on for a while, and for two, the topic this evening is home studio. So because of the stuff that Anth and I do on a regular basis, we don't get into some of the other platforms that there are, and Matt's kind of familiar with those things. And while there's a million different ways to do things and not really any sort of wrong way, it's I don't know, it's just good to hear about different setups and stuff. So we're going to kind of go over how he's working at home and see some of the stuff that he does, and maybe that'll be useful to you. Now, we fell into this problem where we talked too much before we got started, so now we got to remember to re-talk about all the stuff that we...
it was just old video games, and...
No, I mean, like, before you guys got off on that, It was the, I'm trying to remember what, like the
Scarlet interfaces, I think, a little bit, and,
we were talking about episodes of Pensado's Place, and...
Yeah, there's something else, too. The Slate stuff, more Slate stuff.
All the Slate stuff. I remember what it was. Never mind, I'm not going to say it. Slightly disparaging.
Is that why we did it in church today, so we don't get to wreck our New Year's resolution?
Yeah, because it's not New Year's yet, so we have to make it at least over. For Matt's benefit, we resolved to clean up our potty mouths on the podcast, just in case somebody from church listens, which really means Anthony has to not cuss. So we're keeping it to like 10/9 Central Network TV type of language. You can be fervent, you can use strong adjectives, just,
Yes.
not
keep it broadcast friendly.
Exactly, and not NYPD.
Show. Yeah, not NYPD Blue, broadcast friendly.
All right. Well, anyway, I kind of prepped Matt a little bit earlier tonight by saying that we were going to start by sort of delving into the dark days of our earliest recording situations, and I don't know. For me, that means like 4-track tape machine. It's so long ago now that I can't even remember. All I remember is like a new one was $400, and this is when minimum wage was like $3.25, maybe $3.50, something like that.
Was I born yet?
I don't know. When were you born?
88.
Yeah, you would have been toddling around. But yeah, somebody finally scraped together enough cash to get a hold of. I think it was a Yamaha 4-track. It wasn't the good one. It wasn't the Tascam.
The Porta Studios.
Yeah, it was some cut-rate one, but we cut many a garage demo on that thing, and actually we're still using it for pre-production work once we finally went digital years later. But so Matt, how did you get started messing around? Like, were you forever messing around with tape decks and stuff when you were a kid? Or?
Not really. Tape decks were, we used to do practice in my parents' loft above the garage. It would get freezing cold or scalding hot, and it was awesome. I mean, because
I feel that's like why ska bands got started, so you could pack enough people into a room, they're all jumping around to warm up,
right? Man, it was. Well, I mean, we were young and stupid, so it didn't really matter. But as far as like tape stuff that we would do, it would just be to record a session for our own benefits, to look back over it. When I first started getting into recording, it was I would be laying tracks through like the sound card of my Windows computer that I cobbled together. And that was, I think I had some version of Cakewalk that I was trying to figure out at the time. And back then that was like, that was top of the line DAW, So, but a lot of my early stuff with bands was we'd be in a band, and then someone would leave, and we'd never really get off the ground. So what I started to do is, this was like back in the early '90s when 9 Inch Nails like first hit the scene, and I'm like, wow, there's this like guy just putting together all this electronic stuff on him. Just like
by himself.
Yeah, I looked at the CD. I'm like Trent Reznor, and I'm like looking for the rest of the musicians. I'm like, no. I'm like, wow, that's cool. So I got I started getting into like MIDI and sequencing stuff, and back then it was, I think it was a Boss DR660, programming all the drums on, recording into a Roland MC50 with a disk drive in the side of it. And I actually used to take that out and perform, like, you know,
take it with you,
take it with me, perform, load the disc up, load the setup, and then play.
Awesome.
It would be playing the drum machine while, you know, because I just didn't want to deal with people as much. So, but recording, that's, you know, I would record that into like I think, you know, at the time I just started working like with a real job.
Yeah.
So in the early 90s, or it was like mid 90s. So I had like, you know, the work laptop.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just plug it right, my ThinkPad, plug it right into the sound card, record the 2 channels, the drums in first and stuff like that. But, as far as like early DAWs, it was Cakewalk. That was about it. But yeah, it was nothing. I always wanted to get to the point where I could do it myself, because you know, there were a couple times when I actually paid people to do it, and, you know, I'd go into the studio and lay down a lot of money, and
it's never what you want at the end.
It comes
almost never.
Almost never. It comes close. Like, it's like, wow, that's kind of nice.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I wish we had 10 more hours in here, but I don't have $1,000 more dollars.
Right, yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm remembering back when I was doing stuff, I mean, it was just whatever. I mean, we started out when we were 13 years old. My best friend and I were both playing guitar, and he had like a boombox, and we had a couple of those little 10-watt practice amps with 6-inch speakers in them, one of which would actually produce distortion intentionally, and the other one, if you flogged it enough, would kind of break up a little bit. But yeah, like we would actually like play stuff in and then play it back on one boombox into another boombox. One of the machines we had the ability to like plug in a mic. And so we had a couple like $13 Radio Shack mics.
Was it one of those really shiny Magnavox Ghetto Blasters?
Well, no, they were
I had
like,
one of those.
They were realistic, man. It was like Radio Shack brand.
Oh yeah, Radio Shack was back then like
it wasn't bad.
No, it was like
that was Sam Ash for us rural Western New York kids.
Yeah, it was in the middle. Like, hey, we want to record this, but I have no way to get the mic from, you know, an XLR to this 1/4 inch. Let's go to Radio Shack and find some adapter that they have.
Gosh, the collection of adapters, and we didn't ever have the proper names for them. Like, hey, I need a big to little. Like, oh, all I got's a little to big.
Just 1 point on it though, not 3.
Yeah,
just 1 point.
Oh, we didn't own a single piece of gear with a 3-pin input on it. But yeah, we would like play stuff into one boombox just through the ambient mic, and then play that into a mic on the other boombox, and then the other channel would be recording more stuff that we were playing. So we would like kind of multi-track that way.
Nice.
And then eventually somebody got a hold of this. I think it was him actually. My bud got a hold of a 4-track cassette machine. It was already pretty beat. I mean, like there was no clean. It was just
like even recently. Like I remember when I started playing guitar, they would still try to weasel in like the Musician's Friend catalog. They'd weasel like a 4-track cassette recorder in there, like everything else, like Pro Tools, Cakewalk, like all this nice stuff, and then like weaseled in the back somewhere. Who's gonna buy? That's the same Tascam Porta Studio that's been there for the last decade. It's the same one.
Thing is though, like if you were good with it, like if you bought good tapes and ran it like at a really fast tape speed, you could get production values that were nearly as we were making hard rock and metal at the time, like nearly as good as Megadeth's, like the first 2 Megadeth records. Like you could come almost up to that level of production without compression or EQ or anything. Like just the
natural tape distortion.
Let's not call it tape warmth or compression. It was tape distortion. We were pounding on those things. But then what was cool was that stuff all sort of fell away because you could start to get digital machines like these. The mini disc ones were the first. Like I had a Yamaha MD8. They had an MD4 too, which was almost as expensive as the 8-track unit, and you could fit more stuff on it.
Yeah.
But that thing was cool because you could record 1 million hours of 1 or 2 tracks, or 36 minutes at the full 8 tracks. But that would actually let you do some DAW type stuff in it right in the box, and it was slow as sin. Like just setting the in and out points to do takes for a solo took like 20 minutes, and then once you started doing punches, if you wanted to go back and listen to another take, it had to like go in and think about it. You'd be like, all right, what take do you want? It was real chill. It was like, okay, what take do you want? And you'd punch it in and be like, all right, let me get that for you. And it'd slip away for a minute and just kind of click and swish. And then eventually it would bring up, take 3 and play it back. You're like, no, that's not the one. That's not the one. All right, give us take 5.
Go and get yourself a cup of coffee.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
But the cool thing is that brought business to me because I had this machine. I could do, 8 tracks worth of stuff, and I was already pretty clever at bussing stuff down from mixing live, so I actually cranked out quite a few garage demos that were really pretty good because I had a rack full of compressors from my live work, and I actually used I pulled a crossover out of my amp rack to do a 3-way split so I could have multi-band compression. The record was in mono after that, but it was a garage punk band, so like there wasn't really any painting information in there anyway. Like they were a little ticked off that the drum fills didn't go from side to side, but it sounded better than all their friends' demos. But then what happened, after I invested in this and got my garage all fitted out with like a look-through window and stuff, it was all slick and guys were coming around to do stuff. Then these, was it Roland that made one? That it was a 16-channel box. I forget if it had I don't think it had SD media in it. There were some little 4 tracks you could get with SD cards in them, but like this thing was it was the bee's knees, man. It had 16 tracks, probably had a hard drive built in, fair amount of processing, and it had a CDR right in it. And this wasn't that long after CDRs were like, when we got into them, like when I was in college, 97, 98, 99, the last couple of years I was there, I had access to both of the CD burners on campus. There was one in the computer lab, not out where anybody could get it. Like I had an internship there, so like I could use it in the dev lab, and then the music department had one that a couple of us had access to.
So that back when CDRs, you couldn't buy them in spindles, you had to buy them in each its individual regular big.
Oh Lord, not a college student. Well, me and another guy went in on, somebody had this ridiculous sale. There was like a very small quantity of a box of 50 Hewlett-Packard CDRs. Yeah. They were $250 a piece.
Wow.
So my buddy just happened to walk in there. There were like 10 of them sitting there. And he was like, what? He's like, how long are you going to have these? And the manager was like, just till those are gone. So he like tackled the guy out of the way and snatched it back, brought it back. He's like, you want in on half of this? So I was the king of the world. Like I had 25 CDRs all to myself, and they only cost me $2.50 a piece. And this was back in the days where like nothing was calibrated yet, really. Yeah. So like if you screwed up, like there were no limiting algorithms. Like if your mix came out too hot, which they usually did, it was screwed. And sometimes it just wouldn't burn right. Like you would just hit go and wait because it wasn't even like 1 times speed. So like if you had an hour-long CD, 90 minutes of just sitting there praying like something didn't overheat or...
Yeah, I had terrible success rate in the early burning days of burning CDs. Like
finishing?
I would go through them, but I would be funneling them off from work. You know what? I need to back up my hard drive on my computer, so I'm going to need like 5 of them. And everything I have fit on half of one, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
that was, we did a band that I worked with a long time ago. Like they had just finished their 3-song EP, and they're like, all right, well we got 50 of these. They bought a case and the Slim Jewel packs, and they're like, all right, so let's burn them. And we had the CD stompers that you put the labels on.
Oh yeah,
I had those.
I did a release. I think we moved 350 units. And just burn.
I think you were actually at this show.
Yeah,
because Seven Head Division played the first time I ever saw Brian Moore and didn't know who he was. It was back then, but we burned 50 CDs. They were going pretty quick. Like it wasn't a good computer, but it was a computer. Like it was. Like we should check these. just in case. So like they're all stamped.
Going too well.
Some jerk didn't hit the finish button on any of them, or like just because you had to. I don't know why. Why did you have to enable finishing on a CD? Why did they do that? Was there Like, is there a legitimate reason why it
Well,
didn't
because
just
they
do
were
it itself?
they were so expensive, and like the CD, even before CD-RWs came out, it was like, all right, you burned some info to it, and then you could still like open it back up on that computer and do more stuff, and then burn some more info, and then when you were done, it would finalize the table of
Okay.
contents.
Well, that makes more sense. But I remember us going around to all the 5 disc changers in the house and loading up all 5 discs. Nope. Wait another minute till it cycles over. Nope.
You remember
have to go back. Like,
Remember what a big deal that was? Like, not everything would play CDRs or play all CDRs.
Oh my
like,
gosh.
Yeah.
I don't know. And you would get, like, as a sound guy, I would get bands coming up, like, all right, our backtracks are on here. Like, oh, good. So I had, like, my rack mount CD player, which was supposed to be able to handle all these CDRs. And then I had a 5-disc changer from my house that I would also throw on the truck. And then I had, like, 3 or 4 different Discmen that I would plug in one at a time and see what was going to play the track. And a computer, you know, if I had my laptop with me, I'd throw stuff in there, and sometimes that would read it. Like,
we used to have at church. Well, actually, we still have it. It's the only one that still made it. We used to have a nice dual CD player, so you know you could run just straight tracks on one, and then the other we'd split out for split tracks and stuff. But then there was the almighty Sony CD player, CD MD player, actually.
oh, I always wanted one of those.
I have 4. do you want
Make
one?
a nice paperweight.
No, that's the only CD player that's made it. It's made it almost a decade, and it's the only thing that'll read everything. We had you know a nice high-end $700 CD player. Nope, unless it was like you just didn't play burn CDs.
Yeah,
I think it's fight against pirated music. You have to pay 4 times more for that than you did for anything else, and it didn't play pirated music. So
we were talking about that a little bit before we started tonight, and we'll get to it again. But like, just how easy it was just now. Like, I just flipped open my laptop and plugged in 2 different USB interfaces, and it took me a second to do it because I haven't done it in 6 months. But it only took about 4 minutes for me to get both of these things up and recognized by the DAW and assigned all the inputs, and like, boom, microphones 1, 2, 3. Like, Matt and I were talking about like trying to get a SCSI hard drive to work with a Mac. Like, okay, shut it off, plug in the SCSI hard drive, check the cable, make sure everything's tight, make sure the card's tight, set the address, boot it up, nothing. Shut it down, change the address, boot it up, nothing. Shut it down, change the order of the devices in the chain, reset all the addresses, boot it up, nothing. Take it apart, lick all the connectors, plug them back in, change all the addresses, say a prayer, sacrifice a chicken, boot it up. You know, like, just on and on and on and on. Like, and this was like in the dev lab. This was so like, you know, we weren't doing anything of consequence back there. Like, nothing that couldn't wait 45 minutes for us to get a drive hooked up. Like, I just can't imagine working in a studio in the 90s and having to deal with all this garbage, like zip drives and like, oh, which zip drive do you have? Do you have the SCSI one or do you have the parallel one? Because we actually need our data today.
Zip drives.
Yeah, and then if you try to do it on Windows, and then you're like, what are all these address numbers? I have to find something that's free and how much, you know?
Yeah.
And then back then it was Device Mangler, and it was no plug and play. There's plug and pray.
Right. And you were supposed to be able to move a zip disk
played.
back and forth between them, but like, I moved a lot of HTML files. So like, if I took home a section of the website to work on my zip drive and plugged it into my PC zip drive, all the formatting would go.
They just lost 5 hours worth of work.
Well, no, it would all still be there, but it would be like in Notepad or whatever I was working in, like carriage breaks all disappeared. So it was just one big glob of HTML. So like, you couldn't do that. And then you had like all the, what was it? Well, it wasn't so much that you had like the trash folder and this and that and the other thing, but like Macs are so much more used to this now. Like, you eject a drive, it just gives you that like, oh, you didn't eject this safely. Like, before, if you ejected a zip drive from the drive without first removing it from the desktop, you were stuck with that zip drive icon on your desktop until the end of time. There was no removing it for anything. Like, it was just there. It was grayed out. Like, there was some hacker.
I remember all the grayed out stuff.
Yeah, there was some hack. Like, one guy had a desktop just full of them because, like, there was theoretically, you could hack around and do some scary command line stuff and make them disappear, but it didn't work.
I remember there was one computer in our 4th grade classroom that happened to, and that was the only one. Everyone's like, if you got to use the zip drive, you got to use this one just in case.
Right, or you would do it for floppies too. Yeah, so you back up something on a floppy, you take it out, and then on another computer, if you erased it, that was it. You were stuck with that floppy icon on your on the tremendous 640 by 480 screen of your Mac too.
Have you seen that picture on Facebook where it's kids born before the 90s will never understand? It's got a picture of a cassette tape and a pencil.
How those two relate to one another.
But like what I want to do is do one with a floppy disk and a paper clip.
Yeah.
For all those jerks that are like, oh no, this side must go out. No, son of a... Go get the big paper clips.
I had to get a box of those for our lighting console here and a couple other devices that still use them, and they were sitting on my desk. We actually didn't have to order them. I went to every office supply house in town, and I'm like, yeah, do you still have floppies? And like the guy at Office Max literally laughed me right out of the store. He was just like...
Oh no, not the small ones. I need the 5 1/4. The what?
Do you have the punch to make the 5 1/4 double-sided? No.
Somebody actually, one of the secretaries here found one in a drawer somewhere. So like I have it sitting on my desk, and the intern comes in, and he's like, "Oh man, I got bad cable again." 1, 2. All right. Son of a gun. I don't know how much of that I missed. I drew the bad cable this month. But he walks in, he sees these discs all sitting there, and he's like, "Why do you have a box full of save icons on your desk?" Like, yeah, that's what those are. That's what those are for.
I have a floppy disk stuck in my Korg Triton Pro X, and I can't get it out without taking out the whole drive. Like, the paperclip didn't work either. It's just, it doesn't want to get rid of it because it thinks that I might make it go away. And I think that floppy disk might be that Korg Triton's oldest friend. I think that's what the issue is. It doesn't want to lose sight of the past.
Yeah, I have a box in my basement of all the floppy disks from that old Roland sequencer.
Yeah.
Right? So at one point I got rid of the sequencer, and now I want all those actual MIDI tracks back.
Yeah.
Because that was cool music that I wrote back then. It was angry and it was industrial. And
you want to come over and plug them into my Pro Triton X or my Triton Pro X and see if we can pull them all out?
Again.
So what I did is I bought that Roland MC50 off of eBay for like $100, and I think I originally paid like $4.99, $5.99 for it. So I got it and I hooked it up MIDI into my what I was using, like an audio file. M-Box, some audio file into the MIDI into that, and I played all the tracks and I recorded all the MIDI. I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. So I take the discs and I put them away, and then I take the sequencer that I don't need anymore because I have all the MIDI on the computer now, and I put it back on eBay and I sell it for what I bought for it.
You found another box, didn't you?
No, no, I didn't. It gets better than that. So I then take those MIDI files, like a couple weeks later. I'm like, cool, let's load it up into, I don't know, whatever DAW I was using at the time. It might have been, I don't think it was, it might have been Logic at the time. Okay. So I loaded it up in Logic, and it sound like the drums are like, it's hitting crash cymbals and congas, and I'm like, what is this?
You have to readdress all.
Everything is Roland proprietary MIDI address, not general. It was, that sucks. I'm like, all right, well, maybe someday.
I had the misfortune of finding out that just because something says MIDI, it doesn't mean it works on everything. I was like, I don't understand. This says MIDI and it says general MIDI, but this one's $50 cheaper.
Yeah.
Well, that's where that $50 went.
Yeah.
Into the licensing.
Right. Yeah.
Let us not go there. We were going to talk about MIDI, but let's just not. Like, that whole SCSI thing about, like, lick it, change the address, do something to it. Like, MIDI's that times 1,000.
I had to. Well, my session today actually, Edward, my local crazy man, came in to do some jazz stuff, and it's a nice thing, but it's a curse at the same time. Our grand piano is MIDI'd, so I can run. It's nice when there's only one piano player, so we can MIDI, a string pass shoot or something like that. But what he wants is he wants everything transcribed. So Logic will do that. Like, I'll plug in MIDI, and it'll actually print me the sheet music. But with certain jazz stuff, it gets a little hairy. Like, there are a couple portions where I think it skipped half a measure because of something that he was doing. There were so many notes that shouldn't have been in the same chord that it just said no. And I got a half bar rest.
I ain't that polyphonic, you son of a.
It was doing fine, and then it because Logical, if you go to the end of the screen, it'll cut off the waveforms before, at least on mine, and they're still there. Just you freak the heck out for a little bit, wondering what happened to the first 15 minutes of your jazz session, but it stopped for a second. I was like, okay, and it'll kick over, a half bar rest. That was it.
Sorry, dude.
I had a little bit of that happen on a live recording. Fortunately, we had multiple nights, so like whatever little glitch it was that kept popping up. Something kind of important to cover came up a minute ago, and that's like getting your old stuff moved ahead, like moved up into the next realm of whatever you're doing. So like I had stuff that I did on my mini disc recorder, my mini disc 8-track, that when I got my 24-track hard drive standalone recorder, spent a whole weekend out in my shop just playing in session after session after session. And then at least at that point, then I could just plug the recorder. I had the Alesis HD24. I could Ethernet that into my desktop and move all those files over, and then I backed them up to DVD, which are all probably corrupted by now because DVD's not. Don't back up to DVD, kids. Back up to CDR, even if you need more of them. Yeah, like now, at least now they're in Wave, and Wave doesn't seem to be going away anytime sooner. But yeah, like think about all the poor orphaned projects that are out there.
There's probably some really good stuff that's just it's
hidden,
not savable,
hidden among all the dross.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, we're just approaching the halfway mark, and we could probably keep busy the whole time just talking about how stupid it used to be to do.
We didn't even get into old video game consoles yet.
Yeah, we didn't. Me and Matt talked for probably about 15 minutes.
That could be. I started doing mini podcasts. I had like a little 10-minute idea to show folks the other day about mid-side mic techniques. So like maybe we could do like a video game sound mini podcast afterward.
Mike Carroll in for that. Mike Carroll and Steve Patton.
Nice. Oh yeah, they do whole records in 8-bit.
They do.
Yeah.
And Mike, well, I think the place closed, but Mike Carroll used to just fix vintage video game consoles for a living.
I got a couple in my garage. I'm gonna need to go see him.
I got this weird error. It was a Z80 error. I texted him. It was like, Carroll, what on a Neo Geo machine? What does it mean when you have a Z80 error? He got back to me in 5 minutes. He's like, well, I can order you the carton, but it's gonna take a couple of weeks. Like, you can order those? Like, oh yeah, I'll build you one.
Yes.
I still haven't fixed that thing.
I was thinking, actually, before we move on, I was thinking the biggest thing that everybody was lacking was outboard gear back in the days. Like, it wasn't until these boxes started coming along that had a little bit of DSP power in them. Like, you just made demo after demo after demo. Like, that was really the demo sound, was because, like, everything was totally uncompressed, and there really wasn't that much headroom, not that much dynamic range on tape, or even when she had the digital things, it was at least quiet, but there still wasn't that much.
I feel like it was almost more delicate with the early digital stuff.
Well, yeah, because you couldn't clip, and you didn't have any compressors in it. So if you were lucky if you had a rack full of them, like I did for live stuff. Mm-hmm. But that was the biggest thing. Like, I recorded just the last tape demo I recorded. This was in '99, right after New Year's '99 or maybe '98. But anyway, I had a Pioneer tape deck. Went into a garage with a punk band, ran them all through my Mackie 24-channel desk, and just 2-mix out to tape. And I had 2 channels of compression. I had an Alesis compressor, the $99 one that everybody has, and I compressed the kick and the lead vocals. And just doing that made it stand head and shoulders above anything that was getting done on tape anywhere. And actually, I brought a cut from that into a class where we had to like play something that we had worked on, and everybody else is bringing in stuff from like the 16-track ADAT studio and the 24-track MIDI studio. Like, I brought in this tape. I had actually imported. I had played it into one of the Macs in the dev lab and burned a CD of it. And like, I had actually done a little bit of mastering to it, so it was actually pretty loud. Yeah. And I tweaked the EQ a little bit, and so I played it for this teacher, and he's like, "Man, you got a little. Well, there's some. What did you do this on?" I'm like, cassette deck in a garage. Yeah, you're good, man. You're good. Go sit down. So that just goes to show you what. I mean, it wasn't that they were a phenomenal. Oh, they did turn into a phenomenal band. I mean, they were 14 at the time, and I was not a terrific engineer, but just having a little dynamic control can really make a project. So anyway, the next thing I wanted to get into is just kind of have Matt run down what he's currently using, because Anthony and I work in DAWs that are a lot more conducive to high track counts of recorded audio. They're not, while you could do singer-songwriter type stuff in them and MIDI type stuff in them, sort of like every DAW has at least a little bit of functionality for the stuff that aren't in his strengths. Like you can do MIDI and Nuendo, and you can do MIDI and Reaper, but the DAWs that are really more aimed at songwriters can still do audio. Like I know guys make whole records in Logic. Anthony used to, actually. You could speak to that.
That I had to use it all day today. I was so pissed because the shortcuts are all different. Like I'm all pretty much moved over to Pro Tools now. So you go and hit 3 to record, and I get a new screenshot, and everything that I just did disappeared in Logic.
Oh.
There's almost a lot of broken stuff today.
Well, anyway,
when I first got into the Mac realm for recording, Logic was my first choice. And I tried to use that for a while, and to me it just wasn't it was easy to use. But when I found Reason, Propellerhead Reason, that was the bomb. And the thing that caught me on Reason was the rack.
Yeah,
like,
the patchable
rack.
Yeah,
I'm like, wow, that
cool.
looks like
It looks like an old Moog.
looks like a compressor.
Yeah.
And then, I hit tab and the whole thing flips over to the other side. I'm like, oh. And then and
all the cords wiggle.
And all the cords wiggle. And I'm like,
so
charming.
Different colored patches. And
It was, once I discovered Reason, even though I spent a crazy amount of money on Logic, I'm just like, well, yeah, whatever. I'm not going to upgrade that. I'm just going to Reason, because it's just to make a song, just to do something. Mm-hmm. It's super easy, and you just throw tracks onto the rack, or create audio tracks on the rack, and that creates a channel on the mixer, which is I think modeled after an SSL.
Probably, yeah.
It is, yeah, because it's got a master bus compressor, which is really
the G channel, or no, the E channel, yeah.
It sounds great, and then the sequencer was good, and it's just easy. It's just like made for
guys that write songs.
For guys that write songs, yeah. And you're talking about outboard gear. It's just like, I want to put a compressor on this, so I'm going to drag a compressor onto the rack and hook it up. Like for my bass, like I'm going to do this, and I just put a little compressor on it, and then I'm like, well, I wonder if I put a stereo splitter and just split the low end into this compressor, and then I'll put another compressor here and put the high end and put and compress it differently, and maybe put a little chorus on it, and then it goes from there, where you can just build obscene monsters. Mm-hmm. Now the thing with Reason, I think the niche that it's really fallen into, and it does this exceptionally well, is electronic music.
Yeah.
And for me, coming from the old Roland MC50 programming in a little LCD screen, I want to change the dynamic of this note. Trying to figure out how to do that. So I was into electronic music, doing it that way, and then with this, it's easy.
Yeah.
It's easy. And then like what you were saying about, you just plug in an audio interface. I really only need a 2-channel interface. I'm using one of those Focusrite ones you have there. And
if you're going to play and sing at the same time, that's all you need.
No, I don't play and sing at the same time. I really need, for me, I need just a really good audio interface that sounds good. And then from there, it's the sources. And, and that's for me, instruments and things like that. But all the instruments that come in it, if I want a piano, I pull a piano out. Or if I want some weird underground piano, what I do is I start from one of the presets. They have this thing called a combinator, which I don't know if you guys know Reason, but the combinator to me is like the awesomeness of Reason all together. And
explain it a little bit, because I'm not familiar at all.
The combinator is a device in the Reason rack that you can store and save other devices in. And it has some controls that you can map to some of the one or more of the other controls. So if you wanted to move a couple knobs on a couple of the racks that you have in there, you can do that. But if you just throw a blank combinator out there, they have pages and pages of presets for these. So for everything from drums to guitar racks to everything. And so the combinator kind of saves like, like if you got like 3 synths, just to create one kind of that real gritty sound.
Yeah.
And then that's going through, some of it's going through like a delay module, and you could save it all in that combinator, and that combinator's like one unit.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That stuff like that gets more complex in another kind of DAW. And not that it can't be done, but it sounds like they've packaged that up really nicely to where you don't have to be like some sort of egghead patch wizard to make it all happen.
I remember watching an old YouTube, or not old YouTube video, but it was like the making of the Joshua Tree, where they went back and showed how many different guitar tracks they had to layer through different stuff just to get the intro sound on Where the Streets Have No Name. And like all the pads, or the string pad patches that they had to run through this, but they wanted certain stuff here, so they had to reroute it to another physical channel and then to another physical channel somewhere else to get all that stuff. And like, it was neat because when they did it on the actual console, like, they faded in the parts until it got back to the actual thing, the actual live track. But they built a heck of a lot easier to just run some digital or virtual wires around and do it that way.
And John, you were talking about like not having the outboard gear. Like, yeah, some of the outboard gear is really expensive. And like back in the day, I had one DBX compressor, and I had like some Carvin Studio Mate mixer, which I still have, which is brilliant.
You're the first person I've ever heard describe carving gear as brilliant. That's,
no, I'm not. Well, yeah, I have one of their PAs too, which I know you've used. So, which
I owned it too.
That's nice. But no, like if you're gonna mix like drums down to 2-channel, you could do it with the Studio Mate. But not having a lot of outboard gear, I like good tools in the box.
Yeah.
And one of the things they've done recently is they started opening it up to third-party vendors to create rack extensions. So,
really? That's neat.
And some of them aren't.
No, that's not. You can't just slap any old VST plug-in in there. It has to be one that's written to behave in the rack.
Right.
That's cool, though.
But even all the stuff that it comes with, I don't really go outside of the box of what Reason comes with very much.
We were just talking about that a little bit before. Like the first 6 or 7 years that I used Reaper, I only used the plugins that came with it. Like it's only just this year that I've started like branching out and looking for other VST and AU plugins to use with it. Because Anthony and I were talking about this a little bit too before. Like do a project with one compressor. Like how many did you do where you just had that one 160 for compression, and so you play one thing after another through it so they can all have a little dynamic processing on them. Like, it's limiting, but a lot of times limiting yourself, you challenge yourself to really make good decisions instead of just like, I'll throw a Neve compressor on this and an SSL on this one, and like having 1,001 choices for everything almost makes it harder.
Yeah.
Whereas instead, if you have one compressor or two compressors that you know really well, that makes, it gets what's between your ears working better to,
And that's like that Slate plugin that I got, the virtual console one, is nice for that because it's 5 options, and what it'll do is it'll actually start to, not naturally, but almost like digitally compress due to how hard you're driving the console. So you're not really actually squashing the signal. You're limiting what the console or the virtual console is putting out. So I've started doing that before I even add a compressor plugin into it, just to see how much that'll pack it into the mix.
Nice. Yeah, that's why all those old consoles had compression built into them in the first place, was you could get everything you needed, all the dynamic processing you needed right out of the board. Yeah. But like Matt hit on it, you don't need the gear anymore. Like especially if you're doing EDM. He brought that up a little while ago. I was watching some short little documentary about Skrillex. Like he does stuff in studios, but he also made a record entirely in hotel rooms on his MacBook while he was on tour. And
I think the Gorillaz made their last record on iPad.
Nice. I heard of a couple of people doing that. Yeah. So yeah, you really don't need it. And another thing too, like we were talking about tape plugins, like everybody I know that actually physically owns a reel-to-reel machine is looking to sell it. Because they're only, you hear all these bigwigs talking about like, oh yeah, I have to use my Studer. It's just the best. But what you don't hear them say is how much they pay the little man in the lab coat to come in and clean it and align it and find obscure parts for it. And does anybody even make tape anymore?
Yeah.
Or are they still making tape?
I think you can still get it from 3M.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But if not,
but it's money.
Oh yeah.
I think there's a warehouse somewhere
with one old German guy walking around.
It's like the Area 51 warehouse. All it's got is like tubes and tape.
Or like our dream technician is a Japanese guy with a German accent from England or something like that.
In a lab coat.
In a lab coat that just walks around, fixes everything, and. Yeah.
But yeah, like when it's your, if you're a smaller studio or a guy messing around at home, like, and again, if this is your hobby, like, I'm really glad that people do this because I love to see technology not die out. Like, I love going to farm days and seeing people thresh wheat with a steam-driven thing and do whatever. So, like, but
there's certain stuff that can die out though, like 8-tracks, like not 8-track recorders, like just 8-track tape decks. Like those are okay with going away. I feel like regular cassette decks are okay with going away.
Yep. Like when you have to, when it's your own job to get out the denatured alcohol and the Q-tips and go over all the heads and check all the bushings and make sure nothing's dry rotted, and
you have to bake the tape to make sure it still works.
Right. Yeah. Then it gets pretty hectic. And if you have a more obscure machine, or even if it's not that an obscure ever machine, like you can get them dirt cheap now. And the reason is because they've stopped making them. So you can't just get parts for most of the stuff anymore.
Yeah, there is a reason why they don't make those anymore.
Yeah, it sucked. Like I've said it more than once on this podcast. Like, give me a tape emulator because all these people that grew up on these things are still in the world. They still know exactly what a Studer should sound like on its best day. So, like, the people that if Waves or Slate or whoever's going to model a Studer, they go find somebody who's got a good one. And they show up right after the little man in the lab coat has left and everything's clean and aligned and we got good tape on it.
Yeah.
And then they model it on its best day and they know from their years of experience exactly what it should sound like. And then they build you a plugin where you can have all of that and then like uncheck the hiss button. So like you can have tape hiss if you want it or not. Because 24 tracks of tape hiss is pretty significant, even on a really good machine.
Yeah,
and then going to one of these stupid modern day sessions where you got 135 channels of hi-hat. But Matt really hit on it. Like you don't need anything but a laptop and an interface. And if you want to, like, okay, you come up with some really nice mic pre's or something, you can swap those in. Yeah. But you just don't need the racks and the consistency that you get. Like, I've heard many guys say that they are starting to prefer 1176 plugins because at least they know when they plug it in what they're going to get. Because, like, even in the same studio, you're like, all right, well, I'll use this one. No, I must have used the other one last time. Like, they're just, two, same unit, same studio, all the same conditions, same guy maintains them both.
God forbid you have to put them on a stereo mix. You got one that turns out like 2 decibels quieter than the other one. There's no actual reason for it. It just is.
It just is. That's the goodness. And I don't want to see that stuff go away either. Like, I love the idea of vintage gear. I just don't want any for myself. Like, let the guys with the mahogany showrooms have all those things to play with, and I'll just take the very nice models of those.
Yeah, there's just something so nice and imposing and walking into a studio with a rack of really good gear, but you don't see them use it. Like the last time I was down at Starfield's for a session, they've got this rack. They've got a bunch of nice Ambic Neve 9098s. He's got a UA LA610, which is like the cheaper version of an LA2A, I think. Like just some really nice stuff, like some TL audio stuff, some Focusrite. He's got a Red 7, all this other stuff. And all he used was the universal audio for the lead vocal, and everything else just got run through plugins. Like, you've got literally $300,000 worth of pre's and dynamics sitting in a rack. And
is it even switched on?
Yeah, well, you have to switch the whole thing on to get that one unit on. It's all on one string, but
you could actually probably make a fair amount of money. Like, you could have a whole product line for kids with home studios. Like, the entry level is just posters of really slick racks, and you put one up on each side of your monitors. And then
the advanced version has little LEDs behind it.
In the poster, yeah. And then the platinum level is, real mock-ups of like laser scanned,
just the fronts,
just the fronts with
printed.
lit gauges and real knobs on them, but it's just the fronts.
It's like that in Windows Media Player when it used to have the audio readout waveform, so it looked like it was responding to the music, but really it was just
canned.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it was just a loop.
There's nothing going on, but there's so much going on at 60 on my screen. I don't understand.
All right. Well, what else do we talk about? You guys got anything in mind?
Um,
Could this be another short one? I hate to leave too much dead air in there.
right? No, wasn't there something else we were going to talk about?
I kind of forget. We sometimes talk about the either the music we could talk about the music we've been listening to. Did you hear anything good this week?
No. Not really, no.
My head exploded for Van Halen again this week. I actually wrote an article for Coming Up about probably the stupidest song on the latest record, but how
Oh, that's right. They're still doing records.
yeah.
That's cute. I was not impressed when I went to go. Were you at that show at Buffalo?
No, I wasn't. Thankfully.
Cool. Good for you. Good for you. I would not have paid for those tickets. We got the bass player in my band. His uncle bought 600 level tickets. They were like $1.80 a piece.
600 level.
6 100 level. Sorry.
Oh, 6 100 levels. I was
6
going to say
100
that's
level.
pretty high up.
Yeah. I didn't even know that was in the arena. Well, actually, I had to fly the blimp, and
It was up in the press box, right? Yeah.
but
On top of an air duct.
yeah, like it. I don't know. It was cool to see. I was more interested to see Kool and the Gang, even though there's only one guy. That's still from the original band. But like, yeah, their new record. Van Halen came out and they played songs from their new records, and it was the bathroom and beer break. And then, as soon as they started playing something from like one of the first two records, ground just filled back up again.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah. It was like.
They spent so long dicking around trying to figure out who was like how to not be mad at each other. I feel like they really deprived the adoring public of their presence for far too long.
Yeah.
But they're still really good players and really good songwriters. Like they just still do a lot of really simple things, and it just makes the music so good. Like no rhythm guitar under the solo. The song has to carry it. Like the back section's got to carry it.
Yeah, a good
and the strength
good
of the
rhythm
solo.
section is.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of gets a little bit to what you said earlier about, 128 tracks of hi-hat.
Yeah.
One of the things
Minimum 128 hi-hat.
Like I started experimenting this a little bit in Reason since like my drums are mostly MIDI. I'm like, well, what if I take, the drums that I kind of want to sound real and then I mix an 808 under the kick section, and I just see how that can just go.
Isn't that mandatory for any kind of electronic music?
Or metal. Well, I was talking to Brandon, his Matt's bandmate, about this. Brian Moore played me a kick track, group of tracks from I think it was a Sirens and Sailors project. So like really heavy, mathy kind of stuff. A ton of information below 100, and it was kick in, kick out, foot away from the kick, room mic, high pass or low pass rather,
right.
And then 2 samples flown in. I'm like, dude, what? Really? And he's like, no. So he, one at a time, like played me the kicks, muted one, put it back in, muted another one, put it back in, and every single one of them had something to contribute. And I was like, so why isn't it, 7 or 9 or 14 things for your stinking stupid kick drum here? And he's like, well, the 7th thing I tried didn't work. So I tried an 8th thing and a 9th thing and a 10th thing, and 6 was the right number for this kick drum. So like if you're on top of it, yes.
I can see how that could work. However, it's just we were talking about simplicity in music, like almost like limiting yourself. Like we have so many options that we could possibly do.
Yeah.
But that almost stifles creativity. Like I find myself most creative when I'm sitting down to write a song and I'm like, I'm going to write this in this key, in this tempo, using this instrumentation. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of it. Because otherwise, if I have everything that I could possibly do, if I just start going through the combinators and Reason, I'm just going to be like goofing off with some whacked out keyboard
6 days on an intro of a song that's 15 seconds long. You're like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you're talking about like Van Halen, where they have no rhythm guitar under the solo. And it's the sound of the drum, the sound of the bass underneath it that's carrying them, and it's the quality of the solo, which Eddie obviously is really good.
Yeah. And that's what I love about him is it sounds like a live band. Their records have always sounded like a live band to me, that's exciting just for that. Even though it's in the studio and it's perfect, it still just sounds like dudes jamming.
There's I always like finding on old records like that one mistake or stuff, because it wasn't like you couldn't go back and say, hey, just throw some Beat Detective on that sucker. No, there was no Beat Detective. You were the Beat Detective. You had to find it.
Place that bass drum hit over a couple milliseconds and get that back on.
I've done stuff like that.
Let me find a smaller razor to cut that with. But like with all this stuff now, like I really like with the last record that I did with my band, we did it. There was almost no correction time-wise at all. There were a couple things because I think it was actually a clock issue that I had to move some stuff back around because it sounded okay when I recorded, and I went the next day and it was moved over, so I just nudged the whole track over. But there wasn't. We tried to not correct anything. There's no pitch correction on it, which I wonder about sometimes. There are certain parts where you're like, well, maybe just a little bit of that, just to make sure it's okay. But we all have been doing it for a long time, and it's not. What's the point of putting out an album that's not a person anymore? It's all been processed, and like this processing is fine. Like all the plugins that you've got and stuff, all your compressors, and you're pretty much what you would use for outboard gear, not auto-tune, not all that stuff, but like how much can you make as a person without abusing a computer to make you sound better? You know
right.
I mean?
Yeah. And I'm thinking that there's a line, there's just a line that, are you listening to the computer make the music, or are you listening to the musicians make the music?
Right. Yeah.
And that's the line that I dance on a lot because I need auto-tune very badly. And there's a lot of bands that I like that really, it's that one guy kind of thing throwing stuff together, and it's kind of electronic and stuff like that. But
even when you go back and listen to, what was the first Nine Inch Nails record? Well, I can't think of the name of it.
Oh yeah. Pretty Hate Machine.
Yeah, Pretty Hate Machine. That was all like, I don't think there was any correction on that. Like, it was definitely all sequenced and sampled and stuff.
Right.
But have you seen his gear room? Sweet Jesus. the amount of patch cables in that thing is ridiculous. Like, there's just walls of old Mooger Fooger like racks and stuff. Like, he'll actually make all that stuff. Like, there's a lot of stuff that he does that's, like computer samples and everything, but he's still putting him into it.
Right. Right.
I think that's maybe the line you're talking about.
And it's interesting the different ways you can go about stuff. Like, Van Halen comes up with this really wide, spacious guitar sound, but it's really just because, he had split his signal into 2 heads, 2 amps, 2 mics, maybe 4.
Yeah.
And he just played it all through, and it's monstrous. And then you go to something like Alice in Chains, where you got Cantrell, and it's 4 amps, 14 microphones, 6 passes. And he's good enough that it still sounds like one hand.
Right. Just a big hand.
But it's not that much bigger than just Eddie playing stereo guitar.
Is it bigger, though? Like,
Beginning of Check My Brain is pretty big.
That's newer, though. Like, I feel like there's a lot.
No, and that's like the most recent record. They didn't go that nuts on earlier stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Like, I feel like they're more old school guys, but like stuff on like Wood or Them Bones, like, or even Man in the Box. Man in the Box for being, when did that come out? Like 92?
Yeah, 93.
93, okay. That, I still think that's one of the, like, definitely not huge in a giant sonic realm, but just badass sounding guitars. And that,
And to double back a little bit on the idea you were talking about, actually, we all mentioned this before in different conversations, like, and it came up on a podcast that I listened to today. I heard Steve Slate say it. Open up your DAW, create 4 tracks, hold it right there. Make a piece of music using just that. Or take as many tracks as you want, do it with 1 compressor plugin and 1 EQ plugin.
Keep bouncing stems down to another track.
Either or do all of that in one project. But either keep bouncing stuff down, because that was how I got good at mixing drums. Was I only had 8 tracks, so I would use them all to create a drum mix, and this was the terrifying thing about that MD machine I had, the mini disc machine.
So you just keep busting down.
Well, you could record 8 tracks, and you could bounce them down one chance.
Oh.
So, like, you could bounce 8 tracks of drums down to tracks 1 and 2. There was no undo. You got that one time. So I got really good at committing to a drum mix.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and then we'd go and do the whole rest of the record on top of it. Boy, that was chilling. And the whole band would be behind you, like the sound of fingernails being bitten and sweat dripping on the floor.
That's awesome.
But in terms of limiting, I almost think like it's great to have like the sky be the limit and say, all right, because I've been in a lot of places like, it would be so nice to have, 2 more tracks so we could stereo this or whatever. And so I think it's important. It's important to do that stuff if it's going to contribute. You know what I'm saying? Like, think about it every time. Like, is this one of those things where like you would curse yourself if your gear limited you to not being able to enable those 2 more tracks to get a stereo egg shaker on your project, or can that stuff just go in there? And
Really,
get
what you need to do is just auto pan that shaker every time.
Have you given up on making a Jewish reference every podcast and instead make an auto pan reference every podcast?
It's been the last few, hasn't it?
Yeah. But going in like, shoot, maybe lose my train of thought. I guess just making the decision, like, don't necessarily. I mean, it is fun to go and do those things where, like, all right, I'm only going to use four tracks, or I'm only going to use 8 tracks, or I'm only going to use this compressor plugin and this EQ plugin on everything, or maybe do all of that stuff. But I like to, I don't know. So you put limitations on myself, but not put limitations on myself. Like, basically, make myself justify everything I'm going to do. Like, I don't just automatically open up 14 tracks if I'm starting a drum session. Like, I'll start in my head like, okay, could I do kick and 1 overhead, or does it need to be kick and 2 overheads, or does it need to be kick, 2 overheads and snare? Do I need tom mics? Do I need percussion mics? And really just convince myself to arm those tracks one after another and place those mics.
What I've done a lot more is do build the whole thing, close mic everything, and then end up like have it all there, but then just listen to it with kick, snare, and overheads.
True. Well, that's exactly how I build.
See if, like, because I don't want to, like, if there's some weird phasing issue and I can reverse it with another microphone that's somewhere else, like, it's nice to have. But for the most part, what we did is, kick, 1 snare mic and overheads, and that was pretty much it. And that turned out way better than having to go back in and strip all the noise for, like, there's 1 tom in the song, but there's 5 tom tracks. And then you've got to cut out an entire song's worth of stuff because there's just 1 floor tom hit the entire song.
Do we just run out of gas?
Yeah, that might have been it.
Fair enough.
Video games? You want to get back into video games?
The last tom hit. Kaboom.
I was going to mention something. I don't know if anybody has been thinking about this, but we wanted to put ourselves at your service. We are ever at our friends and close relations' service to listen to stuff that they're working on and come up with ideas and troubleshoot and physically look at gear because we're all in the same neighborhood up here. But if any of you out there in listening land or if you're reading the blog would like us to give your stuff the once-over, I'm not going to put out the rate sheet here, but we do this for a living. We're for hire, and
you get paid?
Occasionally. Some. It's actually, I'm really happy with my job, though, so that makes up for the ramen noodles taste great with job satisfaction on them. But like something we if you're working on a track in your home studio and you just want another pair of ears to listen, we'll do that. I'll do that for nothing. Like send me your 2 mix. I'll put the ears on it and see if I can help you out with some advice. Or if you have got some stuff tracked and you're looking for mixing, or if you're mixed and are looking for mastering, we do that stuff. So not to turn this into a total shill for our freelance careers, but if you're looking for somebody, here we are. It's almost like we're old friends. You know us already.
You have to put up with us. You get us in your email, so why not?
Right.
Why not further that relationship?
So anyway, that's there. We're here for you. Give us a call. We'll tweak your audio.
I should stop there.
Fair enough, because we are trying to keep it 10/9 Central, and we've done a darn fine job so far.
I think I only said 1 swear the entire time.
that why you're shaking?
My eyes twitching a little bit. Need to get it out.
All right, cool. Well, there you have it. We covered a lot of stuff that I thought was going to be merely introductory, but it seemed to be more fun to reminisce about the bad old days than it was to talk about how good stuff has gotten now. So let that be a lesson to you, whippersnappers. Get your reason out and don't bother with all the old analog stuff. It was crap back in my day. It was crap, and it's still crap. All right, so yeah, there's no takeaway here. Just take it for what it is. I like to do a wrap up and whatnot, what have you. But anyway, if you're a listener and not, hey, the only one in the building. All right, I'll set the alarm when I leave. Thanks, Greg. Actually, we're not at the Shea Kosobucki tonight. We are in the green room at the palatial church where I work. That was maintenance coming in. He's done plowing the driveway. He's going home, so I got to arm the ADT on the way out. Where was I? Oh, if you're a listener and not a reader, check out the blog because I frequently forget to post that sort of anywhere on the YouTube feed. So we do a blog too. It's smart, the number 2 noise.blogspot.com. We post nearly every day. I was actually looking at it. If we stay on track, even with the new schedule where we don't post on Saturdays, we will only be down 40 posts for the year. For the goal at the start of this was to post every day. And ambitious. It was pretty ambitious, and we kind of actually I thought of something too. What I'm doing now is like, okay, I wrote a mid-side article and posted an example, and then right away got another that was about mid-side mic technique. Now I want to write about mid-side plugins for processing your finished audio, but I don't want it to turn into the mid-side show for guys that don't care. So, but what I used to do is like, okay, I'll save that idea for later. And then later, when I'm out of ideas, I can't remember it. So I'm going to write that mid-side article now.
Which we'll get a whole
save it.
Yeah. Schedule stuff out until it's the 29th, so only a couple more.
You have to save it on your floppy drive.
I have a few of those around. I'll save it on my watch because my watch has more memory than my first computer. But what was it? February 18th. That's our cake day, as the kids say these days. That was the.
What constitutes a blog post, though? Can we just do, like, crappy one-liners?
You can't send in a text from your phone and have it count. Because this isn't
what if I go on the blog?
This isn't mommy blogging. Quote of the day. All right. I have done a couple really cheater posts where, like, I would be like, hey, there's 2 really awesome articles on Pro Sound Web. You should go read those. Thanks, bye. Like, I did that once, and I think I posted things that you've said a couple times.
how I started describing wines and fashions of compressor functions.
Yeah. It's got a good nose, but it's a little.
There's not enough attack. Seems like the release time on this is just a little slow.
I thought you were talking about compressors in terms of wine. You were talking about wine in terms of dynamic processing?
Oh, yeah, I was at a wedding, and that was the only thing, like, we had just done a show on compressors, and the only thing I was like, there's not any attack on this at all. And one of my buddies looked at me, I was like, no, really? And this is another guy that runs sound for a living, and he's going to school to be an electrical engineer, and he's looking at me, he's like, there's not enough attack. He looked at me, he's like, well, what about the release time on it?
With a subtle look.
Very many glasses of wine. We tried to turn the wine into an Avalon. It didn't happen.
So it wasn't.
If we drink enough wine, could we get enough functions to make it a really nice compressing wine?
I think it gets harder and harder to add functions, though. The more you.
That's why there's a one-knob compressor.
Word. I just got my first one-knob plug-in. I love that sucker.
Oh, I got one of those, too.
More.
It just has a saturation knob.
Yes.
Go.
That was my favorite thing about the DBX 160. Was it A or X? The half rack?
The X.
The X. Just a slider that said more. Perfect. Done.
More what?
That was
perfect
for
a
college sophomore. Just turn it up until it starts to suck, and then turn it up a little more because it's ska. Or whatever. Everybody was making ska records when I was learning that stuff. So a 160A X was the perfect tool. Just put it on everything, one track at a time, because we only had one. But anyway, we're coming up. We're looking to reestablish contact with our European counterparts, and I'm too tired every time I think to do it, but I got to look at the timetables and find out when we'll be awake and Ika will be awake to And that dude, I haven't heard from him in a while, but
Michael.
Was it Michael, the guitar player?
Guitar player.
The blind guitar player? Or he was putting together a rig?
Oh, yeah. I think it was Michael.
All right, so
Mike and Ike. I think that sounds
Mike
familiar.
and Ike?
I think that was it.
So anyway, we're going to try and reestablish contact with the continent and see if we can actually raise one or both of those gentlemen for a Skype podcast. It might be, I think, us in the morning and them at night is what it's going to have to be. So like maybe we'll get lunch and then podcast and then go back to work.
Take the day off.
Dead silence. What's that?
I have sick days, I think.
Is that when you're so sick that you don't come into work, you just work from home?
There are stipulations on working from home, and I haven't figured them out yet.
My wife is so mad at me for working at home. Like, I'm really good about it. Like, I'll stay in the room with the children, and I'll open my laptop, and I'll put my headphones, and I'll be right there so that if somebody does hit their head on something.
But you're a million miles away.
No, like, if they're screaming, I'll take the headphones off, and...
The headphones aren't that good.
No. I suppose I could get a pair of open-back models or something like that. Like, no, my wife was really cross with me for I was editing more dialogue at home. It reminds me when I used to work at the hospital. Like I heard the same conversation over and over again, especially during winter because we'd all have to take care of the snow removal too. Like guy's wife would call him, like, "When are you coming home?" Like, "What? I am." You mean the place with the doctors and where I fix things? Oh, you mean where you are and the kids? Oh, I get to go there. When it's warm out, I'll see you.
That place that I pay.
We're like cops and doctors.
For.
We're always on call.
Yeah.
We're never off duty. All right. Well, we're over the hour mark, so the file sizes are going to become exceptional. Actually, I'm curious. Let us know. Send your cards and letters, too. But no, let us know if you can tell if, not me, because I'm still on the ART interface, but if Anthony and Matt sound exceptional to you, please let us know, because I would be delighted to know if, despite using a variable bitrate MP3 at the lowest possible settings in mono with a reduced sample rate, the things I do to get file sizes under 20 megabytes, I can't even tell you. It's
ridiculous.
It involves a cigar, a live chicken, and... Never mind.
Some red candles.
Oh, that was another joke I was going to bring up. You were talking about like how little soul of a human being can actually get in a project. Like I keep expecting the latest version of Pro Tools to come with a new interface that you just give a DNA sample to and leave it the keys and the changes, and you just go out and come back and when it's got the record done for you.
That'll be Steve Slate's release.
That'll be like a
next
saliva
year's
swab,
AES.
though. For it, don't get not that kind of DNA sample. It's a family show.
Not late enough for that.
All right. Well, anyway, we've been the horrified onlookers, and so have you. No, seriously though, this has been the Smart to Noise Radio. I seem to call it that more than I call it what it actually is every time we sign off. So hard to close one of these down. I'm so hungry. All right, this has been. You know what it's been. Thank you. Good night.
Wow.
All right.